So I started the show by sharing a little bit of workplace PTSD. That's how it's coined. I didn't know at the time it was called PTSD. But Michelle, when I spoke to her, shared her experience of the beginnings of what I'll describe as the dark slide down the hole. So if you can share with us and give us some context.
I worked as a first responder and a fitness instructor. Oh, I can already feel I'm there. And in 2006, in December, my whole life would change. I got called down to come and help a man who had banged his head on one of the lockers in the men's change room. And I went down there, and his head was bleeding, and he was sitting on the bench, and it just seemed discombobulated. And I immediately knew something was wrong, but I couldn't quite figure it out. So I said, call 911. It's like it happened yesterday. And he went into a seizure, and he threw his head back. And I was in shock. Now, I'm a first responder, but I'm not a paramedic, so it's not something I deal with every day. And I don't have a partner like a firefighter would or a police officer, so I'm all by myself dealing with something I have no idea what's happening. The people came into the washroom, or the men's change room, and we immediately laid him back as he went into a seizure. And I pulled out my kit, and I looked everywhere for the mask to start CPR because he was passing away, passing out. Immediately his friend came in and says, I'll do the breaths because he's my friend. You do the compressions. Part of me ran away in my head. The rest of me stayed and did it. And we worked on him hard. There was several people with us. I don't recall my staff being there, but there was a nurse that I knew, a firefighter, and we worked on this man. He went gray, he passed, he came back. His brain was aspirating. We heard sounds that sounded like someone surviving. And we turned him over. He wasn't breathing. We turned him back. We kept moving through the CPR. Paramedics finally came. They worked on him, and he died. It was the worst thing I ever experienced. Then they left the body there because the coroner picks the body up. And for hours, I was with the body alone, stepping over it to get things out of the men's lockers so they didn't see the deceased. I was in just a state of hyperarousal, but focused at the same time. The next few days after that, I do believe my employer had a trauma crisis group come in, ask us if we were okay. In fact, they had a patron who had helped me, who did the mouth-to-mouth, ask if he was okay, and everybody seemed okay. And then a year later, I wasn't okay. And I just was thinking about death all the time. I thought death was coming for me. The doom and impending feeling was so extreme. And I went to my doctor, who was exceptional, said, I'm sending you to the anxiety clinic. And I have all this documented, exactly what I'm telling you. And I believed there was a correlation between the man who had passed just a year prior and these feelings. But I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD. For some strange reason, Now, I didn't know about these transcripts until not too long ago. But I told my doctor, I'm going to go to my EAP counseling and talk to that person. And I told that person everything that had happened to me. But he didn't diagnose me with PTSD either. He said, I think it's your past. So I want you to think about everyone who has wronged you and picture yourself killing them. That was the therapy I got. And I got sicker and sicker and sicker. By 2012, I was so sick because now I was seeing psychiatrists and they were loading me up with every medication you could think about. But nobody was removing me from the location. Nobody was giving me the proper therapy. Nobody was even diagnosing me with anything. And the medication wasn't helping. I eventually checked myself into the hospital because I knew I was broken. And I watched myself get sicker and sicker and sicker. And I said, this isn't me. There's something wrong with me. And I can't help myself. And everything that's happening to me is making me sicker. The medication, the therapy, everything. I had to beg with my husband for the hospital to take me in. Finally, after great scrutiny, they checked me in. So I was there for 3 weeks. They took me off everything. I had daily therapy. I was removed from the location. And I started focusing on art and stuff to help distract me from getting sucked into my cycles. And I finally was recovering. But for 4 years, I lived through a medical system that failed me. I even looked at transcripts from some of our doctors or psychiatrists here at VGH that said I was lying, that I was faking it, that I was there for attention, and I just craved it. I wanted to be the center of attention. I'm shocked. I believe the medical system is failing women who are sick with PTSD. And I know now from the American Association of Psychology that women are twice as likely to suffer occupational PTSD than men. As well, I know that Canada has the highest prevalence of PTSD, and that 85% of those will seek help, and over half will leave their healthcare provider without solutions. The system failed me. But checking myself in was the best thing I ever did. And believe me, it's really hard for someone like me who's had a life of real good mental normalcy. And the scrutiny and everything that I thought, and the stigma. I mean, I was one of those people who thought, oh my God, I don't want to be thought like that. I don't understand. How could people be this sick until I got sick? And it was just the darkest despair, agony that just grabbed onto me, and just, I can't even explain it. It was like I was haunted by something. And I would learn later that that's what trauma does. It lives in your subconscious and like becomes a thought cancer, and then starts to control your nervous system. Well, the cognition sits above it and goes, what is happening to me? And I was able, because I had had such a disciplined life before, that I had such a good husband, that I had finances, that I could take care of myself. But I guarantee you, there are going to be lots of women who aren't going to be able to take care of themselves. And I got through it. The cycle became longer and longer in between. I had more relief, and I got into filmmaking because I wanted to transcend my experience, and I wanted something to focus on. And every time a cycle would come, I would run downstairs and start painting boxes and anything to be able to think away from it. And eventually I got better.
Well, thank you for sharing. By the way, I'm not going to be the only one that would be asking questions. I invite anyone in the audience afterwards to ask any questions to Michelle. As you're telling me, or telling your background story, I can't help but think about my experience and to share it in a very, very brief instance. When I left the government after the issue I had with my CEO, within the next 6 months, so I lost my job, my girlfriend broke up with me after I asked her to marry me, and then right after that, my father died. Oh. So that whole stepping over the body thing, I don't wish anyone that experience, if you ever faced it, but it is absolutely surreal at that moment. And I do know I disconnected because there was I'm not going to call it a sense of calm. There was just a sense of nothing, and you just disconnect. And it took me a long time to reconnect. And I was curious what happened when you chose to disconnect between then and...
I think I'm a pretty conscious person about myself and pretty conscious of everyone else. Maybe to a fault where my empathy sort of gets the best of me because I go, whose feeling is this, yours or mine? I recall that when I was suddenly faced with this person below me and their life was slipping away, I think a part of me just went, run. And I think that part is almost still gone. It was the innocence. It was a vulnerability paradox to some degree that in Canada we believe we live in such a safe society that when that belief is severed, it's so shocking. And I think that Canadian in me ran. This can't be real, get out. And the other part just stayed and carried on. And I have been trying to get back that person that's sort of still in hiding, saying, I don't know, it's not quite safe out here. And I do, I worked for the government as well, and I believe that our bureaucracies are failing us in also being able to bring that trust back in accommodations and social and organizational sort of accommodations. I don't think we know how to actually accommodate workers with occupational PTSD properly and rebuild the trust that they've lost. It's very important that we be able to trust our working environment, especially since we lost it. And if employers don't know how to do that, then that job, we can't stay. There's no way when you go through this, you're gonna do it a second time around.
Yeah.
You'll die. There's just no way. It's so unbelievably painful. I want it out so much. And I love living. I'm optimistic. I'm a very motivated person. But when you're in that much pain and you can't help yourself, you don't want to be here.
I'm curious, at any point did you come to this thought that this isn't a medication issue? Because that's what, they just threw pills at me.
Oh, my God.
I spoke and said, okay, you're okay, you're just depressed. I love that one, you're just depressed. Here's a bunch of pills, take this and go. And part of this little voice inside me said, it's nothing wrong with my brain chemistry. Like, I don't need a pill to fix me. But they didn't believe me.
Well, I'm going to say something that I'm sure a lot of psychiatrists are going to hate. The medications didn't work at all. They made me sicker. I would wake up like I was a piece of bacon in a frying pan. The electricity was insane. I think my opinion from all the healthcare providers and everybody I went through, it's a guessing game. But I personally think that it needs to be addressed in the early stages. As soon as it's addressed before the PTSD can take hold, you've got a better chance of never, ever having it fully express itself. And you will have a life free of it. But once it takes hold and fully expresses, and you're with those symptoms for a long time, it is going to be hard to break the cycle. Very, very hard. And if you don't have finances, you don't have a good relationship, your health is not great, other variables in your life are going to sink, you're not going to survive this. There's just no way. It is the darkest, deepest, most horrific thing anyone would ever go through when it's in full, severe, crippling expression. And I'm just warning anybody out there, if you are symptomatic, take it very serious, because it is going to control you.
So I resonate with your story, and I can close my eyes and see it. But can you describe what being in that painful hole is like for a Monday morning?
First of all, you can't be by yourself because it's like a ghost. It comes in a wave and overwhelms you in great fear that something horrible is going to happen. And you sometimes think it's going to be around you. You're always looking for it. And it's so overwhelming and so dark and angry and despairing that, no, I wouldn't even say it's angry. It's just so heavy that I would just get up off the chair and I would walk. I would walk for 2 hours so it would go away. And it would go away. I would be at some peace, and then it would come back. And, you know, the expressions would come in the beginning. You know, they took a while before they rooted in and had control. And then they would be quite frequent. You know, the medications and everything just amplified all of it. And being in the location and the stimuli and just everything compounded. And of course your life is going to add a few extra little bits of stress. They're going to start attaching itself to this, I can't describe it any other way but a thought cancer that just grew and grew and grew in my subconscious. And my poor little cognitive present consciousness was looking at it, but it was overbearing it on when it got so big. And so I kind of babysat it, but it just, I said, if there's a hell, this is it. This is it. Visualize you're in a blackness and you're just swallowing down into it like and that's the subconscious pit where I guess it existed. And it was almost like I had crossed over into something else and crossing, like a quantum psychological leaping back and forth. When I was here, I was fine. When I was in the silence, it just pulled me in like a bad, you know, like I was doing a bad joke and something was pulling me off the stage. But it had feelings. It had doomness and agony and just like if I was going to go to the religious perspective, gnashing of teeth and pain and suffering, and it was just pulling me in. And I don't know what that is. I mean, maybe we have something in our brain that we are connected to something else. I don't know. It was like a kind of weird gateway. It's weird that I'm talking to you like this because now my imagination is kind of going all over the place. But the spell broke after a while, and it didn't have any power after a while. the episodes became longer in between. I would have more peace, and then they would take longer to come, and then longer to come, and so then I could breathe. And because I was making films and writing a lot, I found a place to escape in that, and I love that kind of stuff. I love being creative, so my love for life was always existing in that. And it's an odd thing. It's an odd thing. Like I said, it was something. I remember one time, and I've always have these little visuals and things. When it first was probably at the point where it was the snap. I remember when I was walking down the street, this is when my sleep started disappearing. And that even made it worse. And I was a champion sleeper, so it was bizarre that it was just like the lights went off, like boom, you're not sleeping anymore. And I remember walking down the street and getting a vision of my body cracking in all these different places and light pouring out of it. And then suddenly I just saw myself on the ground. I mean, I'm visualizing this. And like there was a blanket thrown over it of myself. And I thought maybe I have been hiding something for a long time. You know, I have had death in my life. My mother died in a fire. My father died of cancer. But these are a long time ago before this. But this could have been the straw that broke the camel's back. The moment of reality where the other traumas that hadn't had a hold of me were now sort of wanting their time to be seen too. I mean, we live in a life where we're going to have trauma. But this one with the guy dying was exceptional for me. And it just brought everything else to the surface and said, no, you're going to look at all of us now. And for me, at 105 pounds, I was like, oh my God, this is a lot for me to process in all at once. And so I did everything. Like I did bullet drinks and everything because I didn't feel like drinking. I did everything to help with my sleep hygiene. I still exercise. I did everything I could to stay on top of it. But it was unbelievably powerful.
Well, I would like to open the mic to the audience. Does anyone have a question for Michelle?
Thank you for all of you for sharing your stories and knowledge and experience. My question is, you didn't mention the whole education system and the whole emphasis on individuals to be a kind of hero. Your goal is to be either Bill Gates or Donald Trump or, and that I'm an educator and I'm also involved with medical. I'm trained as a medical statistician, so I evaluate. And I agree that a lot of mental health issues are still at either experimental level and there's a lot of treatments which is given through pharmaceutical industry and so on. So there are a lot of issues around there. But also I think working inside the medical school, I think the whole process of education, medical education is based on last century where a lot of parasitic disease or people are not now trained in the new phase of mental violence. I think it's also an issue of violence as well, in terms of whether you say bullying or, and I think, as you all mentioned, we are so much dependent on your own struggles and your own success. But my question is, how did your family, whether your parents, your grandparents, looked at you in terms of your challenges, and how would, because I'm doing I'm doing research on what grandparents and grandchildren learn from each other. And I'm also doing Grandparents Film Festival and bring Grandparents Day and recognize on Victoria Day and so on. And I'm trying to get the organic part, the human side.
Right.
But I think every generation is getting more and more dehumanized, that the new grandparent is Google. So when you had problem, did you Google? Things like that. Okay.
Well, first of all, my parents are not alive, so they weren't going through it. But one of the things that I did do is I Googled for every story of success and hope I could find. I spoke to everyone on the phone. Anybody I ever met that had gone through any of it, I needed to hear their story. I needed to believe I was going to get through this. As long as I could see an end game, I said, I'm in. And I can handle this. I can handle it another day. There's an end game. There's an end game. And I have to say, those stories were unbelievably medicinal. That was the medicine, was the success stories and what everybody else had gone through. And I did so much searching from friends who knew friends, everything, Google everything. And it was amazing what I was able to find.
Anyone else?
Unfortunately, this is not the first time hearing such a tragic story, especially affected by women with PTSD. And you going directly through it. I lost my mom with a very similar, she had PTSD and eventually committed suicide because she couldn't. Yeah,
It's tough.
it sucks shit. So I'm very excited. Thank you for surviving and sharing this story. So as a woman, what support would you like to see for us to support women better? I understand men have this too, but like you said, women, the story of you were someone who just wanted attention. Like, this is not an unfamiliar storyline I hear when women go to doctors and the medical system. And especially when we do research and we understand the medical system is designed for middle-aged white men, the tests are done on them. So even those drugs that you're given are not even designed for someone who's, what, 105 pounds, you said? And losing more and more weight as you're going through this?
I lost a lot of weight, yeah.
I can only imagine. So, support. What was it you needed at that moment that could have helped us as a collective support you more? And what things do we need to start saying to our broken system that they need to really pay attention to what the fuck's going on with women, especially in this journey?
Right.
Because it just angers me.
Okay, so first of all, women need to be believed. Oh, you better believe it. And I am going to say that out to every bloody bureaucracy who's fucking us over. I'm going to say that out loud. Sorry, I know you told me I could swear. I am furious at what I have discovered in our bureaucratic system recently. I've been pretty proactive in seeing changes. We're not being believed. I actually filed with VGH after I saw that transcript. And I said, how dare he? And they apologized and said that the language needs to be modernized. Well, you damn rights it does. And removed some other things that he put in there, as well as, oh, we're going to finally get a female psychiatrist on staff. At the emergency mental health, are you kidding me? How many women are going in there after being raped and you don't have a female psychiatrist on staff for emergency mental health help? I was livid to discover that. We need our WorkSafe BC on our side. And I would advocate heavily that employers who are problematic in the workplace, old boys clubs, be managed by gender managers. The women in leadership positions are not helping. They have way too much compliancy to the old boys club for reasons. You know, we know why. It's not their fault, but that's what's happening. Outsourced gender managers can come in and clean up. They don't have an allegiance to the organization. They can figure out what's wrong, and they can start dealing with workplace sexual harassment, abuses, PTSD, anything that is a gender-specific problem, especially if it's been identified to be more problematic for our gender. And that's what I would advocate for. And in fact, I am. Now you got my other side. But we have a failing system. And when I see statistics that are coming out of the American Veterans Affairs that says Canada has the highest prevalency for PTSD, I go, why? Why? Why is that true? Well, maybe we just aren't up to snuff. Maybe we aren't educated enough. Maybe we're not taking early preventative measures. We know that the first responders just got PTSD presumptive, but it was male dominant that got it first. The firefighters, the police officers, and the paramedics, more male dominant. The nurses had to fight for a year and a half before they got PTSD presumptives. Now, I'm sorry, but I think Canada has a long way to go before it can say it's a gender equal society. I think there's a lot of sexism in our country, and I think it needs to be fixed. And when we all look at the implicit biases and the things that we're still operating from, these are the reasons why these decisions are made. And they're not fair, and they're costing the taxpayer way too much money. In the long run, they paid for 3 weeks for me to be in the hospital when they could have removed me from the site in 2008 for a couple of weeks, and I would have been as good as gold, likely. But they just don't want to believe. They don't want to do the things that are necessary in the short run, and then we end up with a mess, or we end up with suicides. There was an RCMP woman that committed suicide in 2018 after years of dealing with sexual harassment and then being put through the crappy system that we have. And then she got exhausted and couldn't take it. We had a VPD do the same thing. There's firefighters. They're not getting the help. And now we live in an era where people are going to be standing up to workplace sexual harassment, but for what? To be bullied and harassed right out of their jobs and maybe into a grave? Sorry, I'm getting a little ranty. But I see the system failing. And one of the reasons I see is because of what I went through. I said, no, I want to be participating in changes. And I go, oh my God, this is our bureaucracies? No wonder I was failed.
Michelle Brezinski, everyone.